Hello everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Watch my video and subscribe my channel. Despite Taylor's desperate pleas, Ridge chooses his destiny, Brooke above their engagement. Ridge Forrester quits his engagement to Taylor Hayes, leaving her upset in order to rejoin with Brooke Logan on bed and breakfast. Taylor's impassioned pleas are futile, as Ridge vows Brooke his sole real love. Prepare for an explosive fallout. Ridge Forrester chooses Brooke over Taylor in a devastating final breakup. TLDR, Ridge Forrester quits his engagement to Taylor Hayes despite her desperate pleas, claiming his heart belongs to Brooke Logan and reaffirming his dedication to reuniting with her. Fire the engagement has officially ended. Hold on to your tissues, bold and beautiful lovers, because Ridge Forrester just delivered the most brutal rejection we've seen in years. The waffling is over. The back and forth has stopped. Ridge has made his decision, and it is very clear. Taylor Hayes is out and Brooke Logan is in. No, this is not another temporary Ridge flip-flop. This time feels different, very distinct. What happens to Taylor following Ridge's rejection? Taylor Hayes is horrified when Ridge Forrester refuses to reconsider their engagement, revealing the sad truth that Brooke Logan is his actual destiny. The scenes are going to be heartbreaking. We're talking about a woman who has returned from the grave twice for this man. Taylor is pulling out all the stops, frantic pleadings, emotional manipulation, and possibly even raising their children Thomas and Steffi. What about Ridge? Extremely cold, unmoved. Brooke and I are already mentally planning our wedding sites. What makes this particularly cruel is that Ridge no longer pretends to be conflicted. There is no, I need time to think, or it's complicated. He is essentially telling Taylor that their entire engagement was a mistake, and Brooke has always been the one. Ouch. Will Ridge immediately propose to Brooke? Given Ridge's reputation for bouncing faster than a tennis ball, don't be surprised if he's on one knee in front of Brooke before Taylor's tears have dried. This is typical Ridge Forrester behavior. Discard one woman and instantly hurry to the other. Remember when he married Brooke in Italy, about 5 minutes after leaving Taylor? Or that time in Aspen? Transition times are not his strong suit. He transitions from one relationship to the next as if he were switching TV channels. The bigger picture. What's going on here is more than just another Ridge flip-flop. This feels like a purposeful reset for Taylor Hayes' character. After more than 30 years of being characterized by this toxic triangle, Taylor may finally be able to have storylines that do not depend upon whether Ridge chooses her or Brooke. And honestly, it's about time. Rebecca Budig is an amazing actress who deserves better than to always play second fiddle to the Bridge fate story. Allow Taylor to find a man who chooses her first for once. But make no mistake, the immediate consequences of this will be explosive. Ridge is not merely canceling an engagement, he is also risking his connection with his children, dividing the Forrester family and sparking a Logan versus Forrester war that might last months. What is the most twisted part? Ridge undoubtedly believes he is doing the right thing by being honest about his emotions. The dude lacks emotional intelligence. Ridge Forrester's decision to end his engagement to Taylor Hayes was more than just another chapter in their long and complicated love story. It was a thunderclap that echoed through every hallway of Forrester Creations, every corner of the Forrester mansion, and every fragile heart still hoping that this time, perhaps, love would be different, more stable, and more genuine. It was not. Ridge's voice was like ice, harsh and sharp, slicing through decades of shared history, near-death experiences, comebacks, betrayals, and fragile reconciliations. Taylor stood there, eyes wide, breath shaking, her hand still clutching the engagement ring she once felt marked a promise. "I can't do this, Taylor," he said, the words falling like stones, final and immovable. And though she reached for him, tried to remind him of the life they had built, the family they had raised, the tears they had shared when they thought Steffi would never walk again. When they buried Phoebe, when Thomas spiraled into darkness, his eyes were already elsewhere. Somewhere blonde, somewhere familiar, somewhere named Brooke Logan. Taylor, in her desperation, tried everything: reason, history, the children, even her own vulnerability, exposing the scars she bore from years of being Ridge's second choice, his backup plan, his emotional safe house when Brooke's world crumbled and her own shone too brightly for him to ignore. "Ridge, please," she said quietly, "don't toss us away again, not after everything. We've come too far." But Ridge had that look that always preceded the storm, as if his mind was made up and his heart had already crossed the bridge, physically and symbolically, back to Brooke. He told her he respected her, that he would always love her as his children's mother, that their history was sacred, but he couldn't lie any longer, not to her, not to himself, not to Brooke, not to the idea of destiny that had haunted him like a siren's call since the day he first saw Brooke Logan in that design office so many lifetimes ago. The cruelest thing was that he didn't cushion the blow by hesitating, asking for time, or pretending this was hard. "I made a mistake," he said. "I thought I could build a future with you, Taylor, but my heart has always belonged to Brooke." The words struck like bullets, tearing apart the delicate scaffolding of hope Taylor had erected since their reunion. She reminded him of the promises, the evenings spent arranging their wedding, the vows he murmured when he slid the ring on her finger, and the family they promised to repair. "So what about Steffi? What about Thomas? What about the family that we worked to reunite?" she asked, her voice shattering like shattered glass. Ridge hesitated for a while before shaking his head. "They'll understand. They always do." Taylor saw a pattern that had consumed her youth, prime, and dreams, a carousel she had repeatedly mounted, only to be flung off beaten and broken when Brooke called him home. The engagement was over, not paused or postponed, but dead. Ridge was already on his way to Brooke, imaging the future he had denied himself during his months of deliberation, picturing the Logans happy, the Forresters seething, the headlines screaming, "Destiny reunited!" Taylor sank to the couch, the weight of decades crushing down on her, tears streaking her face. She had journeyed across continents, faked her own death, made a career, had 2 children, and yet she always ended up here, watching Ridge go away. What happened next was chaos. Thomas raged, blaming Brooke for manipulating their father again. Steffi Sothed at the humiliation of her mother being dismissed as an afterthought, and the Forrester boardrooms buzzed with whispered questions. If Ridge marries Brooke again, what does that mean for the business? For the legacy? It was amazing that there were any ashes remaining from the so-called bridge after it had been burned so many times. Brooke, for her part, was radiant, shocked but not astonished, wary but eager, knowing that this time felt different because Ridge wasn't wavering, wasn't breaking holidays or hearts. He was choosing her with merciless certainty. Katie advised her to be cautious. Donna popped champagne, and Hope silently feared what this meant for her fragile relationship with the Forresters. Meanwhile, Taylor plotted, not for retribution, but for survival. She told herself she deserved more, vowed she would never let him do this again, and promised Steffi and Thomas that this would be the last time she begged for a guy who had always viewed her as a placeholder. And yet, when the cameras cut to her alone in the darkened living room, staring at that engagement ring, the truth was written all over her face. She still loved him, wanted him, and believed, somewhere deep and unhealed, that Ridge Forrester would one day wake up and realize that destiny isn't a blonde in a silk robe. It's the woman who stood by him when the world turned cold. For the time being, fate was known as Brooke Logan. Taylor Hayes could not sleep that night. The engagement ring rested on the coffee table like a harsh monument to empty promises, its brilliance a mocking rather than a dream. Every shadow in the room brought back memories. Ridge kissing her under the Forrester Christmas tree while Brooke stood outside in the snow. The look in his eyes when he told her he would never let her go again after Aspen. And the way his hands trembled when he thought she had died in that helicopter crash so many years ago. And suddenly, all those promises had vanished with a single conversation. Her phone buzzed nonstop with Steffi's furious messages demanding answers. Thomas's increasingly erratic voicemails promising to fix this and make Ridge see the truth, and even a harsh message from Ridge himself. I'll always care about you. Please don't make this any more difficult than it already is. Taylor laughed cruelly, as if years of being the backup, the runner-up, the almost but not quite, could be any more difficult. Meanwhile, across town, Brooke Logan stared into the mirror, unsure whether to grin or cry. She hadn't planned for this, not this time. There were no midnight seductions, manipulative ultimatums, or choose me or lose me forever shenanigans. Ridge had simply approached her, raw and determined, and spoken the words she had waited half her life to hear. I'm done fighting it. You're my destiny. But Brooke also felt the weight of it. She'd been here before. Tearful reunions, rushed weddings, glittering promises that faded in months. She wanted to believe this was true, that he had stopped waffling and was no longer the man who shattered 2 families for a single kiss. But in the privacy of her bedroom, she said to Katie, "What if he returns again?" Katie, being the pragmatist, just responded, "Then he's the same Ridge he always has been. The question is, are you willing to take the risk again?" The aftermath from Forrester Creations began to unravel like a slow-motion car catastrophe. Eric shook his head, tired of the never-ending triangle that has cost the company more than gossip column ink. "This is going to split the board again," he said to Donna. "Steffi will be furious." Thomas had already begun planning, saying to Paris that it was time to remind his father of Brooke's untrustworthiness. Old obsessions resurfaced in him as ghosts of bogus CPS calls and destroyed marriages. Steffi, meantime, was enraged. She stormed into Ridge's office, her eyes blazing. "How could you do this to Mom? After everything she sacrificed? What happened after she forgave you for every humiliation? You choose her again." Ridge, tired of being the villain in his daughter's eyes, simply replied, "I chose honesty. Would you rather that I marry your mother out of guilt?" The remark stung because they were true and nasty. Steffi left, promising to defend Taylor even if Ridge did not. Taylor began to spiral as he felt the walls closing in. She turned to Finn for solace, only to find him hesitant and unable to take sides after the family's ordeal. "You need to focus on your health," he said gently. "This obsession with Ridge, it's eating you alive." That night, she poured herself a glass of wine and stared at the engagement ring until the room blurred. A terrible thought began to form in the back of her mind. What if I simply disappeared again? What if I abandoned everyone to their fate and started over? Others gazed from the shadows of Los Angeles. Bill Spencer saw an opportunity. A fragmented Forrester family represented weakness at the top. Hope Logan was concerned that her mother's reunion would re-inflame Thomas, jeopardizing her fragile life balance. Even Sheila Carter, lurking on the outskirts, smirked at the pandemonium, for where there were Ridge, Brooke, and Taylor, there was always room for someone like her to sneak in. The ensuing weeks would not be pleasant. Ridge had previously created invitations for a small ceremony with Brooke, something pure and free of all the drama. Taylor received hers as a formality rather than as a guest. "I want you to hear it from me before it's in the press," Ridge said. She ripped the note in half. Years ago in Monte Carlo, she stood on a rock and told herself that she would never be humiliated by this man. Yet here she was, a brilliant doctor and globe traveler, reduced to a footnote in Logan's narrative. Taylor Hayes had one card left to play, the truth behind Ridge's decision, not the version he told Brooke, but the one mumbled in drunken moments about fear of being alone, aging, and legacy. "He doesn't love you the way he says he does," she whispered to her own reflection, her eyes icy and steel returning to her spine. "And if he thinks he can just erase me, he's wrong." This was no longer simply a broken engagement. It was the beginning of a conflict. Taylor Hayes stayed at home for 3 days after Ridge's awful choice. And 3 days is a long time in Los Angeles. The press had already begun whispering, "Logan, destiny restored." Taylor jilted again. The paparazzi gathered outside her fence, like vultures around a new wound. Inside, her thoughts was filled with incomplete discussions and half-swallowed shouts. Steffi arrived first, furious and protective, opening the drapes with the subtlety of a hurricane. "Mom, you cannot allow him to do this to you again. He humiliates you, runs back to Brooke like a trained dog, and expects you to do what?" "Sit here and cry," Taylor, her eyes empty, muttered. "I don't have the strength to fight anymore." But Steffi did, and a conflict began to build in her heart. Thomas was terrible. He stormed in 2 nights later, jaw tight, hair tangled, eyes wild with that old, dangerous fury. "We made a pact," he said. "You and I. We brought him back to you. We fought Brooke off, but he still chose her." No, Mom. This isn't over." Taylor urged him not to spiral, to leave it alone, but Thomas was already planning, thinking of ways to make Brooke Logan pay for upsetting their family again. Old ghosts of deception swirled in his blood. Phony calls, wrecked marriages, and changed history. He assured her he wouldn't go that far again. But Thomas Forrester's promises were like ridges, wonderful until they were broken. While her children railed on her behalf, Taylor spiraled inward, questioning everything: her career, her decisions, and her worth. How many years had she spent waiting for a man who never actually stayed? She remembered the helicopter crash, the evenings in Paris, and the texts that went unanswered while he was in Brooke's arms. She remembered faking her death to bring him peace, only to return and find herself in the same maelstrom again. Late one night, with a glass of red wine in her hand, she said to herself, "What if I walked away for good this time?" However, even when destiny does not choose you, it is difficult to let go. Brooke Logan, resplendent in the light of Ridge's restored adoration, attempted to play the grateful victor. She gave Taylor flowers, white lilies, and a note saying, "I never meant to hurt you." Taylor did not open the card. Brooke smiled for press shots, assured Hope that things was different this time, and informed Donna that Ridge was now ready to stop waffling. But even Brooke felt a shiver run down her spine when she saw the sight in Steffi's eyes at the following board meeting. A cold, smoldering promise of retribution. Brooke had gained the man, but she had reignited the conflict. Ridge moved rapidly, unaware to the severity of the wounds he had inflicted. Wedding plans were whispered within weeks, nothing grand, just something intimate, meaningful, and soon. Katie raised an eyebrow, Eric sighed, and Bill Spencer smirked from his skyscraper office, already plotting how to use the chaos to weaken the Forrester-Logan alliance and entice Brooke back into his orbit. "Ridge never lasts," Bill remarked to Justin. "He leaves a trail of broken hearts, and every time he makes a mistake, Brooke runs back. This time I will be prepared." Then came the moment that changed everything, a leaked photograph. Ridge and Brooke were kissing on the Forrester estate balcony, champagne in hand, and Taylor could be seen in the background, indistinct but unmistakable. Alone, watching. The tabloids ate it up. Jilted fiancé crashes lover's toast. She hadn't been invited. She had come to return the ring and conclude things on a dignified note, but instead she became the ghost at their feast. That night, something in Taylor hardened. She called an old buddy named Nick Marone. He had once served as her escape, alternate life, and almost. He responded on the first ring, his voice pleasant and curious. "Taylor? It's been a long time." "Too long," she responded. "And I think I finally need someone who never treated me like a consolation prize." The ripple effects were merely starting. Thomas began bringing Hope closer under the ruse of co-parenting, his obsession reignited now that Brooke was back in his father's arms. Steffi began clashing with Brooke at every meeting, turning even the tiniest business decision into a battleground. Donna told Eric that the family quarrel could jeopardize the company's next line if they were not careful. And somewhere in the shadows, Sheila Carter spotted an opportunity. A shattered family was a playground for chaos. By the end of the month, the lines had been painted between Team Brooke and Ridge, basking in the bright light of destiny, and Team Taylor, damaged but not broken, gathering allies in the dark corners of Los Angeles, nursing old wounds and new ambitions. Taylor, for the first time in years, wanted more than simply Ridge back. She sought authority. This drama is about to burst into full-fledged war. Romantic, corporate, and familial. Should I? Continue with a third wave, another major expansion. Featuring Ridge and Brooke's wedding being disrupted, Taylor falling, coma/heart scare, and Thomas crossing the line. Introduce Nick Marone and Bill Spencer as wild cards, with Taylor perhaps selecting one of them, not for love but to fight back?